An anonymous dev talks about Fortnite's constant push for new content, and the effect it has on developers. Polygon has published a story on how the sudden and ongoing success of Epic Games' Fortnite Battle Royale led to significant perpetual crunch for developers working in quality assurance, customer service, and production roles. To name just a few, developers from Epic, like many at other game studios that have been publicly called out for regular crunch, say that crunch is an unspoken requirement of the job, though never really an official mandate. The full story is an important read, though unfortunately not an unfamiliar one, for game developers, and a reminder that sometimes the pressure to crunch is not as black and white as an explicit rule. Developers in QA, for instance, anonymously tell Polygon that Epic Games' push to keep Fortnite's momentum going on the rollout patches all the time means that many teams exist under a near constant pressure to crunch. The company gives us a limited time off, but it's almost impossible to take the time. If I take time off, the workload falls on other people, and no one wants to be that guy, says one dev that says they work an average of 70 hours a week. For full-time staff, Polygon's sources say the pot is sweetened by wages, bonuses, and benefits that make it easier to mentally justify constantly putting in excessive hours. For contracted staff, a source says management saw extra work as a requirement for limited-term contracts to be renewed. All management wanted was people who are disposable. A source discussing contract employees told Polygon, the situation was, come in and do as many hours as we need you. They put the contractors in a situation where if they do not do that overtime, they know they are not coming back. Staff working in customer service told Polygon of similar issues after Fortnite's sudden growth. In that case, a source says that Epic accelerated hiring to try to accommodate the sudden influx in support tickets. But it was not an issue that could be fixed with the kind of sudden hiring spree that brought 15 London trained staff to the company in a single day. The spokesperson from Epic Games did give several comments to Polygon on the studio's crunch culture, noting that extreme situations such as 100-hour work weeks are incredibly rare, and in those instances, we seek to immediately remedy them to avoid recalls. The spokesperson also notes that Epic has implemented mandatory time-off policies and aggressively growing the team, improving our planning process, and experimenting with approaches. Polygon's full story has come from the past and current developers working at Epic Games, including more comments on how the day-to-day at the company has changed since Fortnite Battle Royale's launch, how developers say management and HR have done little to address those problems in the time since, and comments from Epic on the many issues that is brought up in the article. Hennig discusses how single-player games are not dead. There's a growing concern among developers and players that single-player experiences might be left behind in favor of live games. But game designer Hennig discussed how that might be avoided during a recent interview with VentureBeat. Hennig is best known for her work on Legacy of Kain and the Uncharted games, where she developed and fleshed out characters layered and flawed. According to her, writing something that's simpler and more two-dimensional feels dated. When it comes to speculating about the future of single-player campaigns, with a linear story and an interesting cast of characters, Hennig is not worried. She writes off the single-player is dead notion and explains that they are just becoming harder to pitch. I do not think anybody would say single-player is dead. Look at the current crop of games. It's just a harder and harder proposition, she says. So why is it becoming more difficult? Time and expectations. According to Hennig, we used to make games in a year. Jak III we made in a year. Uncharted took 3, because we had to build the whole engine, she explains. Uncharted 2 and 3 both took 2 years each. That's unheard of anymore. 3 years is short. Right now you can already see that's a lot more expensive than it used to be. A lot of games are taking for around 5 years. Sometimes more. Teams are bigger. The fidelity is higher. There is an apparent requirement, whether it's coming from publishers themselves, or players or whatever, that games have more features and are bigger. As Hennig has said before, she believes that if the FIRSTUNCHARTEDUTAME were pitched today, it most likely would not be greenlit. The idea of a finite-ish other experience that has no second modes, no online, the only replayability was the fact that you could unlock cheats and stuff like that. No multiplayer, nothing. That does not fly anymore. But single-player games have something special that live games struggle with, Hennig says, and that's story. All of those things I do not know the word I am looking for, but they play less nicely with story. They are less conducive to traditional storytelling, she says. That has a shape and an arcade destination. At end, a game that is a live service that continues, does not. Be sure to read the entire piece over at VentureBeat, where Hennig also talks about literary Easter eggs, her work on the Uncharted series, and more. It's definitely worth the read. A few months ago, Mages of Mystralia launched on the Nintendo Switch, giving our friends at the GDC Twitch channel a chance to check in with the developers at Borealys Games, and see how life has been treating them after making their custom spellcrafting adventure game. During that chat, game designer Patric Mondou shared helpful insights about the design of Mages of Mystralia, as well as thoughts on a future of game publishing. For smaller devs, you can read these selected portions of our QA with Mondou down below. Once our spell system was fairly advanced, we mostly toyed around with it, and we just played with the spells. Immediately you get inspirations for puzzles just playing with your system. If you can do that with your system, then it's probably because it's fairly advanced. It's probably because you have found something that's worth playing. If simply just toying around is fun then you have a game. I am pretty sure that all the emergent games out there, like Minecraft, we started with something along those lines. As soon as you see that, you can imagine having fun with the game for hours just looking at it. It means that it's just complex enough so that players have a lot to explore and discover. And one of the things that we wanted to design to go along with that system was a set of monsters and puzzles that forced the players to think creatively and create a new spell, and not always simply use the last spell they created and spam it. One of the most difficult things we had to do was find enemies that are not simply just meat shields, but actually require you to try something new. One of the enemies that's right along that philosophy is the gargoyle. It's an enemy that you can see in the crypt, which is our third dungeon, our third main area to explore. When we playtested the game or had players try out the game, one of the first things that they told us about that level is that the gargoyle, the enemy, is one of the most interesting enemies in the game, and not because the enemy itself is particularly difficult or appealing, but mostly because whenever they would discuss it between themselves, the playtesters found out that they each created a different spell to defeat it. One of them used what we had designed as the main solution, which was simply using a decoy. Another one created a stationary fireball that they would just use as a mine. so that the gargoyle would simply march on it and receive damage, and another player, he used an inverse augment on the fireball to shoot fireballs from his back. So we had 3 players, 3 playtesters that each had their own approach to solving the combat situation, but with completely different approaches. So once we saw that, we decided that it's what we wanted the all-out game to be. Of course, since we were too deep in production, we could only do so much.